Hello, my name is Brian. I'm a writer with over 25 books published on Amazon, and welcome to the next video in this series for Brother Philip. This is Chapter 9, Father Kyle. Father Jacob dismisses Brother Philip from Mass. He's still wrestling with his need to tell the young man the secrets of the chapel. Father Kyle tries to help Philip, but no one is willing to share what is really going on at St. John's Chapel. I hope you like this latest chapter. Please click subscribe and leave a like for the video. Every subscriber helps to light the way, and every like points the way to those who are lost. Chapter 9, Father Kyle. It was Sunday, and Brother Philip was in the chancel putting his white cassock on over his dress pants and shirt. Father Jacob, in his white cassock and green chasuble, approached the young man with a decidedly uncomfortable expression on his face. This was unheard of for Philip. The father had never spoken to him before Mass, not once in all the weeks he had been there. In fact, he had gone out of his way to pretend that Philip did not exist. To see him coming towards him gave Philip shivers, though he could not explain why. "Listen, Boyle," Jacob said. "I think it's best that you don't participate in Mass this morning." "What?" "Take the cassock off. You're not participating today." "But why?" Philip asked, wondering if he had done or said something wrong. "Because I said so, Boyle. Remove your cassock and find something else to do." You want me to sit in the congregation?" "No, you wee fool. I don't want you in the congregation. I don't want you in the church at all. I want you to go somewhere else. You can come back after Mass is done." "Why?" "I'll not argue this. Now get out. Get out before the people start to arrive." Philip bit his lip and stared at the father with a hurt expression. But Jacob had already turned his back on the boy. Philip hung his plain cassock in the closet and dragged himself out of the chancel reluctantly. He went to the front of the chapel and grimaced when he heard cars arriving. He did not want to anger the father further, so he ducked down the hallway towards the kitchen. He stepped out the back door and stared at the fields behind the church. St. John's Cemetery was off to his left, but he averted his eyes from there. It was only a couple of nights since his horrible dream about that place. He had been tempted once or twice to look for the headstone from his dream, but he did not have the courage to venture onto the cemetery grounds. He did not even look through the parish records to see if there had been a Father Gerald Wilson buried there. He might have even served as parish priest, but still Philip could not bring himself to look it up. He took a deep breath and wandered to the side of the building. Still dressed in his freshly pressed shirt and pants, he sat miserably on the bench there. He stared out at the landscape without seeing it. He ignored the pleasant weather because it too reminded him of his nightmare. He sat back and sighed heavily. Maribel Fitzgerald climbed down from her son's pickup truck irritably. The infernal vehicle was so far off the ground she felt like she would fall and break her neck every time she tried to get out of the thing. Her son Michael rushed to her side and practically lifted her off her feet. Then he placed her gently on the ground. She swatted him with her purse and grumbled to herself, "Can you not find yourself a car that doesn't put me life in jeopardy?" Michael snickered. This was a familiar refrain from his mother. She hated his truck from the day he brought it home. She turned her back on him and tottered towards the church door. As she went, she caught sight of the young priest assigned to Father Jacob. He was sitting on the old park bench beside the chapel and looking like he lost his best friend. She paused to stare and then hardened her heart so she could walk away. The Christian in her wanted to ask him what was wrong, but this place was tainted by that thing in the basement. She did not want to risk getting caught up in anything to do with it. She turned to the door and steeled herself to walk inside. She slowed to allow Michael to place his strong arm around her shoulder before walking in. Father Kyle walked up the driveway to St. John's Chapel. He walked briskly, as he always did. He was as full of energy now as he had been years ago. He walked towards the church and saw someone sitting on the park bench at the side of the building. As he got closer, he saw that it was Brother Philip. "That's odd," he said. "I can hear the organ playing. He should be in the chapel and assisting with the Mass." He stopped at the corner of the church and stared. He chewed his lip in thought for a while. He could hear the first verse of the processional hymn begin, and knew he should be inside by now. He grimaced and looked towards the church door. Then he looked back towards the lad and sighed. "What, pray tell, are you doing out here?" he called out. Philip turned towards him and then looked down at the ground once more. "Why are you not inside helping Father Jacob with Mass?" Kyle asked him sternly. The young priest looked up at him and shrugged. "The Father told me to get out," he said. Kyle sat down and looked at the young man with concern. "Why would he tell you that?" Philip shrugged again and went back to looking at the ground. Kyle sighed and stared across the fields. "Who's Father Gerald Wilson?" Philip asked. Kyle's head rocked back as if he had been struck. "Where on God's green earth did you hear that name?" he asked too harshly. Philip sighed and sank a little farther into the bench. "I was afraid you'd say something like that," he mumbled. "He was parish priest here, wasn't he?" Kyle's throat and mouth went dry. He had not heard Father Wilson's name spoken aloud in many years, and even then it was spoken in hushed whispers, as if the name itself was cursed. In many ways it was. No one had really taken stock of the situation at St. John's Chapel, but it was suspected that at least half a dozen priests had died here over the past century. Died unnaturally. Father Wilson had been the first. "Why do you ask, my son?" Kyle said through his dry mouth. Again Philip shrugged. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat and turned to meet Kyle's eyes. "You're afraid to talk about him," he said. It was not a question, and Kyle squirmed in his seat too. "Where did you hear that name?" The young man sighed heavily and looked down again. "You're going to think I'm crazy," he mumbled. "Come on, tell me." "I dreamed it." Again Kyle grimaced and squeezed his eyes shut for a moment. He well remembered the disturbing dreams he experienced many years ago. They all happened after he went into the basement at this chapel. He recovered in time for Philip to look at him again. "Tell me about your dream," he said. Philip shook his head. "No, I can't. I don't want to think about it, much less tell someone else. It was a horrible dream. It scares me even now." Philip sighed and leaned back against the bench. "Who was he?" he asked again. Kyle gritted his teeth and ground them together. That is a very long story. I want to hear it. I need to hear it. Kyle groaned inwardly and dug his knuckles into his eye sockets. I suppose you do need to know. Has Father Jacob told you anything? Philip shook his head and stared Kyle in the eye. Tell me. I need to know. When Kyle had finished with the story, Philip stood and walked to the back corner of the building. He beckoned to the father and pointed to the cemetery. That's where my dream was, he said. I went to the middle of the burial grounds and saw a tombstone there. It said, Father Gerald Wilson, may he burn in hell forever. Kyle felt a chill race through him, but then he placed an arm around Philip's shoulders. I can assure you his headstone does not say that, but he is buried there. I was afraid of that, Philip said with a sigh. I just knew it would turn out to be true. Why is that, my son? Because everything else came true. Some things I don't know or I can't remember, but the things I'm seeing in my dreams are coming true, even though I didn't know anything about them before. I've only been here for a few weeks, and most of the things I'm dreaming about happened a long time ago. Years ago. Thanks for listening to Chapter 9. I'll see you again soon.